The emergency ward buzzed with chaos as nurses hurried between patients, but the laughter of Dr. Rebecca Halloway cut through the noise like a scalpel. She stood at the foot of a hospital bed, arms folded, smirking at the young black girl gasping for air. "This isn't a charity clinic," she sneered. "Take her to county if she wants free treatment." The room fell silent. The patient's mother, a tall woman in a tailored suit, stepped forward with steady grace. Her voice was calm but carried weight. "That's enough," she said, placing a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You'll treat her now," Dr. Halloway scoffed. "And who exactly are you to make demands here?" The woman pulled a keycard from her pocket, her expression unflinching. "My name is Dr. Maya Caldwell, and this," she gestured around the ward, her gaze locking on the stunned staff, "is my hospital." Gasps rippled through the room. The smirk vanished from Halloway's face as every eye turned toward the woman she had just mocked. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Hours before the confrontation in the emergency ward, the Caldwell household was alive with the usual morning routine. The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the kitchen, mingling with the faint hum of a jazz station playing softly in the background. Dr. Maya Caldwell, dressed in a crisp navy pantsuit, moved between the kitchen island and the dining table with the graceful efficiency of someone who was always juggling three things at once. She checked her phone for overnight emails from the hospital board, reviewed Jordan's school permission slip, and slid a plate of scrambled eggs in front of her daughter, all in the same breath. Jordan Caldwell, just 16, sat at the table with her laptop open. A top student in her honors program, she balanced academic ambition with teenage energy. She was bright, sharp-witted, and carried herself with the quiet confidence Maya had worked so hard to instill. Yet even in her laughter, there was the occasional flicker of weariness, the kind only young people of color in predominantly white spaces often wore. "You have your inhaler, right?" Maya asked, pausing to glance at Jordan. Jordan rolled her eyes affectionately. "Yes, Mom, it's in my bag. I'm not trying to end up wheezing through chemistry class." Maya smiled faintly, but the reminder wasn't casual. Jordan's asthma had been managed well for years. But Maya never forgot the night when her daughter was just 8 years old. Gasping for air while they rushed to the ER, it had been one of those moments that seared itself into a mother's memory forever. The two finished breakfast quickly. Before leaving, Jordan grabbed her backpack and leaned in to kiss Maya on the cheek. "Good luck at the board meeting. Don't let Whitman talk over you again." Maya raised an eyebrow. "You've been listening to my calls, haven't you?" "Only when you're pacing the kitchen and muttering about old money investors with outdated ideas." Maya couldn't help but laugh. Her daughter saw through everything. By mid-morning, Jordan was at school, her day packed with AP classes and basketball practice, while Maya drove downtown toward Caldwell Medical Center. From the outside, the sprawling building looked like any modern hospital: sleek glass facade, state-of-the-art wings, and a bustling entryway of patients and visitors. What few people realized was that it bore her family's name for a reason. The Caldwell family hadn't always been wealthy. Maya's parents had been educators, determined that their children would reach heights they hadn't been allowed to touch. After decades of sacrifice, scholarships, and relentless effort, Maya had risen through medical school, residency, and eventually specialized in internal medicine. But it wasn't just her brilliance that led to ownership of the hospital. It was a series of bold, calculated moves. When Caldwell Medical Center had faced bankruptcy nearly a decade earlier, Maya had been part of a group of physicians who pooled resources to save it. Through persistence, she gained majority stake. It was her hospital, though she often chose to work incognito, walking the wards in a white coat like any other doctor. To most, she was just another physician. Few knew she signed the checks that kept the lights on. Inside the boardroom that morning, she faced the familiar chorus of old voices. Charles Whitman, the longest-tenured board member, leaned back in his leather chair, his tone dripping with condescension. "Dr. Caldwell, While I respect your concerns, we can't simply open the hospital doors wider. Expanding free care programs would only attract the wrong kind of patients. Maya's jaw tightened. She'd heard this before, coded language dressed as fiscal responsibility. The wrong kind? She asked pointedly. Whitman hesitated, then smiled tightly. People who can't pay for the standard of care we offer here. You understand, Maya didn't flinch. Healthcare is not a luxury, Charles. If we're only catering to the wealthy, we're betraying our mission. A silence settled over the room. Some of the younger board members shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to challenge Whitman directly, but not blind to the truth in Maya's words. She let the silence stretch, then continued. If we forget why hospitals exist, we'll lose more than our reputation. We'll lose the soul of this institution. Her words landed heavily, and though Whitman didn't respond, Maya could tell her point had made its mark. She had learned long ago that change in places like this came slowly, one battle at a time. That afternoon, as Jordan wrapped up basketball practice, she felt the familiar tightening in her chest. The school's gym had been stifling, and the air felt thick. She fumbled for her inhaler, but realized she'd left it in her locker. Within minutes, her breathing grew shallow, panic flooding her body. Her coach noticed immediately. "Jordan, are you okay?" "I can't," she wheezed, clutching her chest. The coach didn't hesitate. "Someone call 911. By the time the ambulance arrived, Jordan's condition was worsening. The paramedics quickly stabilized her with oxygen and decided to transport her to the nearest hospital. Ironically, that hospital was Caldwell Medical Center. Jordan lay on the stretcher, her mind foggy from lack of air, unaware of the storm she was about to walk into. Meanwhile, Maya was finishing paperwork in her office when she received a frantic call from Evelyn Carter. "The senior nurse, Dr. Caldwell, your daughter's being brought into the ER. Asthma attack." Maya's heart stopped. She was on her feet in seconds, her papers scattering across the desk. "Is she stable?" "She's on oxygen, vitals holding, but there's something else. Dr. Halloway is on duty." Maya froze. Rebecca Halloway, the physician with the flawless resume and an ego that rivaled her reputation. She was competent, no doubt, but Maya had seen the way Rebecca treated patients who didn't fit her idea of worthy. Politeness turned to cold disdain when she encountered anyone poor, foreign or black. A mother's fear churned into something sharper. "I'm on my way," Maya said, her voice firm. She didn't tell Evelyn the truth. It wasn't just about getting to her daughter. It was about ensuring that Rebecca Halloway never again forgot what kind of hospital this was. That evening, as Jordan was wheeled into the emergency ward, pale but fighting, she found herself staring into the cold, assessing eyes of Dr. Halloway, this patient. Rebecca muttered, almost to herself, flipping through the chart. "She's barely insured. We don't have time for this." Jordan's heart sank, her chest already tight, her body weak. She couldn't summon the strength to argue, but she wouldn't have to, because in just a few minutes, the doors would open and Dr. Maya Caldwell would walk in, not just as a mother, not just as a physician, but as the woman who owned the very hospital where Rebecca stood sneering, and that was when the story would change forever. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The fluorescent lights of the Caldwell Medical Center emergency ward buzzed faintly overhead, their sterile glow casting long shadows across the tiled floor. The air was thick with the familiar hospital cocktail of disinfectant, antiseptic, and the muted hum of machines. Amid the controlled chaos, Jordan Caldwell lay on a stretcher, her breath shallow, her chest rising and falling unevenly. Nurse Evelyn Carter adjusted the oxygen mask on Jordan's face with practiced care. "Stay calm, sweetheart," she said softly, her voice like a lifeline. "You're going to be okay. Just focus on breathing." Jordan nodded weakly, clutching her chest. She wanted to believe the nurse, but fear lingered in the edges of her mind. She'd been here before with mild attacks, but never one this severe. Then the sound of clipped footsteps echoed down the hallway. Enter Dr. Rebecca Halloway. She swept into the ward with the confidence of someone used to command, her lab coat pressed to perfection, her blonde hair tied in a severe knot. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, landed on Jordan. "What's the situation?" she asked curtly, not looking at Jordan, but at the chart Evelyn handed her. 16-year-old female, Evelyn explained quickly. Asthma exacerbation during physical activity. Oxygen levels stabilizing but still low. Needs immediate treatment, likely a nebulizer, possibly steroids. Halloway flipped through the chart, her expression tightening. "Insurance?" Evelyn hesitated. "Listed under Caldwell Care, but it hasn't been updated this year. I'll need to verify." Dr. Halloway snapped the chart shut, then put her on the transfer list. "County General is 10 minutes away. They handle cases like this." Jordan's eyes widened behind her mask. She tried to speak, the words muffled by the plastic. "Please, I can't breathe." Evelyn's jaw clenched. "Dr. Halloway, she needs treatment now. County General isn't equipped to—" "I said transfer her," Halloway interrupted, her voice cold. "This hospital doesn't have room for charity cases." Jordan felt a rush of humiliation, hotter than the tightness in her lungs. Charity case. As if she were invisible, as if she didn't belong here. She wanted to shout, to demand respect, but each attempt only brought a violent cough. A young resident, Marcus Rivera, who had been observing quietly, finally stepped forward. "With respect, Dr. Halloway, she's stable enough for nebulization here. It'll take minutes. If we transfer—" Halloway's eyes snapped to him. "Dr. Rivera, when I want your opinion, I'll ask for it. Until then, follow instructions." Marcus froze, his cheeks flushing red, and stepped back. He knew better than to challenge her openly. His residency depended on her evaluations. Jordan turned her gaze to Evelyn, her eyes pleading above the mask. Evelyn gave her hand a gentle squeeze, her eyes saying what her words could not. "I'm not giving up on you." But Halloway wasn't finished. She leaned over Jordan, her expression a mixture of disdain and detachment. "You should know," she said icily, "this hospital has standards. If you can't afford to be here, you shouldn't come here." The words cut deeper than the constriction in Jordan's lungs. She had studied hard, made honor roll, played varsity basketball, yet in this moment, none of it mattered. To Halloway, she was just a girl with the wrong skin color in the wrong place. Jordan tried again to speak. This time the words tumbled out between gasps. "My mom, she works here." Halloway smirked. "Oh, I'm sure she does. Environmental services, maybe cafeteria staff?" She straightened, satisfied with her cruel joke. Evelyn's head snapped up, anger flashing in her eyes. "Enough, Dr. Halloway." But Halloway ignored her, already turning to scribble in the chart. "Prep the paperwork for transfer. We're not wasting resources here." In the corner of the ward, Mrs. Henrietta Johnson, an elderly patient waiting for stitches, watched silently. She had seen scenes like this before. Dismissals, insults, quiet humiliations delivered to people who looked like her. But something about the sight of this young girl struggling for breath stirred something deep within her. She clutched her rosary tighter, whispering a prayer. Meanwhile, Marcus Rivera lingered near the monitors, his conscience warring with his fear. He had joined medicine to heal, not to turn patients away. Watching Halloway deny treatment felt like a betrayal of everything he stood for. But speaking up again could jeopardize his entire career. He glanced at Jordan, her chest rising in painful jerks, and made a silent promise. "If no one else fights for her, I will." Minutes dragged like hours. Jordan's breathing grew harsher, her oxygen levels dipping again. Evelyn adjusted the flow, trying to keep her stable, but her eyes darted anxiously toward the door. She had texted Maya the moment Halloway ordered the transfer, knowing the mother's arrival could change everything. "Hold on, sweetheart," she whispered to Jordan. "Help is on the way." At that same moment, Dr. Maya Caldwell was racing down the hospital corridor, her heels striking the polished floor like a drumbeat of determination. She had pulled her coat over her suit to blend in, but her presence carried weight even before she reached the ward. Nurses stepped aside instinctively, sensing the urgency in her stride. As she neared the emergency bay, she heard Halloway's voice, sharp and dismissive. "Move her out." She'll survive 10 minutes. County can deal with it. Maya's pulse surged with anger, but she forced herself to steady her breathing. There would be a time for fury, but now strategy mattered more. She pushed the doors open, her eyes locking instantly on her daughter. Jordan's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear and desperation. Maya's heart clenched, but her expression remained calm, controlled. Dr. Halloway glanced up, irritation flashing across her face. "And you are?" she asked, her tone dripping with impatience. Maya walked to Jordan's side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "That's enough," she said, her voice low but firm. "You'll treat her now," Halloway scoffed. "And who exactly are you to make demands here?" Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out a black access card embossed with a gold insignia. She held it up for the room to see, her gaze never leaving Halloway's. "My name is Dr. Maya Caldwell," she said evenly. Then with deliberate clarity she added, "And this is my hospital." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Evelyn exhaled with relief. Marcus nearly dropped his clipboard, and Mrs. Johnson's eyes widened with astonishment. But the most telling reaction came from Dr. Halloway. The color drained from her face, her smirk vanishing in an instant. For the first time that evening, she was speechless, and in that silence, the balance of power shifted. The room was frozen in stunned silence after Maya Caldwell's declaration. The tension was so thick that even the hum of the oxygen machine seemed to falter. Dr. Rebecca Halloway's lips parted as if to form a retort, but nothing came. Her eyes flicked from the access card to Maya's steady gaze, searching for a crack in her composure. Finally, Halloway forced a laugh, brittle and unconvincing. "Owner or not, you can't just waltz in here and tell me how to practice medicine." She straightened, clutching Jordan's chart like a shield. "I made a clinical judgment. She doesn't belong here." The words hung in the air, ugly, unmistakable. Evelyn Carter, still at Jordan's bedside, inhaled sharply. "Dr. Halloway," she said through gritted teeth, "this patient is literally the daughter of the hospital's majority owner. And you just said she doesn't belong here?" Maya raised her hand slightly, stopping Evelyn before she could say more. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "Go on, doctor. Tell me why my daughter doesn't belong." The challenge was direct, but Halloway smirked, doubling down. "Because Caldwell Medical Center is not a free-for-all. We can't accommodate every person who wanders in without proper coverage. If we did, this place would collapse under the weight of freeloaders." Maya tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving Halloway's face. "Freeloaders? That's how you see a 16-year-old girl gasping for air?" "She's stable," Halloway said quickly. "She can be transferred." "She's my patient," Evelyn interjected. "And she's not stable enough for transport." Marcus Rivera shifted nervously, torn between fear and conscience. She needs immediate treatment. Honestly, it's a textbook case. Nebulizer therapy would have stabilized her 15 minutes ago. Halloway shot him a glare so sharp it could have cut glass. "Dr. Rivera, if you value your residency, I suggest you stay silent." Marcus swallowed hard, his hands trembling against his clipboard. He said nothing, but the shame was written across his face. Jordan, still clutching her chest, watched the exchange with wide, fearful eyes. Her voice, faint and muffled by the mask, managed a whisper. "Why? Won't she help me?" Maya knelt at her side, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's damp forehead. Her voice softened. "She will, sweetheart. Or she'll explain to the entire board of this hospital why she didn't." Jordan nodded weakly, trying to draw strength from her mother's certainty. But Halloway wasn't done. Her smirk returned, faint but defiant. "You're making this personal, Dr. Caldwell. It's unprofessional. If word gets out that you used your position as owner to force treatment, you'll have a scandal on your hands." There it was, the veiled threat. Evelyn's jaw dropped. "A scandal? You denied treatment to a minor in respiratory distress." "Allegedly," Halloway snapped back. "There's no record of what I said, and charts can be written however I see fit." She tapped the clipboard. "And right now it says, stable, safe for transfer." The brazenness of the statement made the air crackle. She wasn't just dismissing Jordan. She was rewriting reality itself. Confident that the system would protect her, in the corner, Mrs. Henrietta Johnson shifted in her seat, her rosary beads clicking softly. She had seen this play before. Authority figures twisting words, rewriting narratives, and burying the truth. She'd been on the receiving end of it too many times. But tonight, she silently vowed, she would not stay quiet if asked. Maya stood slowly, her posture radiating control, even as fury churned beneath the surface. "Dr. Halloway," she said, her tone icy but measured, "this isn't just about my daughter. What you just revealed is much bigger." Halloway raised an eyebrow. "Enlighten me. You think this hospital is for the wealthy and the privileged alone. You think patients are burdens if they don't meet your standards. And I suspect my daughter isn't the first you've dismissed, humiliated, or endangered." Maya let the words sink in before continuing. "But she will be the last." For a moment the room seemed to tilt. Evelyn straightened, Marcus's eyes widened, and even the charge nurse at the desk peeked nervously into the ward. But Halloway crossed her arms, clearly unfazed. "Spare me the speech. You can't prove anything. Patients come and go. Some get transferred. That's medicine, is it?" Maya asked. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "Or is it prejudice wrapped in a lab coat?" Halloway flushed, but her lips curled in a thin smile. "Careful, Dr. Caldwell. Accusations like that can ruin reputations. Even yours." It was then that Marcus, trembling but resolute, finally spoke again. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension. "With respect, Dr. Halloway, I heard everything. And so did Nurse Carter, and Mrs. Johnson." He gestured toward the elderly woman, who nodded firmly. A flicker of unease passed across Halloway's face. Evelyn stepped forward. "And I've been documenting this entire encounter. Timestamps, vitals, and verbal orders. It's all going in the log." The color drained slightly from Halloway's cheeks, but she quickly recovered. "Logs can be misplaced. Notes can be rewritten. Who do you think the administration will believe, me or you?" It was a direct challenge, and it revealed the deeper truth. This wasn't just about one cruel doctor. It was about a system built to protect people like her, people who had learned to wield policy, paperwork, and privilege as weapons. Jordan coughed violently, her small frame shaking under the strain. Evelyn hurried to stabilize her mask, glaring at Halloway. "We're wasting time. She needs treatment now." Maya placed her hand gently but firmly on Evelyn's shoulder. "Do it," she said. "Administer the nebulizer." Evelyn hesitated. "But if she tries to override," Maya's eyes hardened. "Let her. And let her explain to the entire medical board why she overruled the hospital owner while a child was in distress." The defiance in her tone sent a ripple of energy through the room. Evelyn moved swiftly, preparing the treatment, while Marcus quietly assisted, his hands steadier now. As the machine whirred to life, Jordan's breathing began to ease, the medicine opening her constricted airways. Relief washed over her face, though tears glistened in her eyes, not just from the attack, but from the humiliation of being treated like she didn't belong, and Maya saw it. She saw the weight on her daughter's shoulders, the wound that would linger long after the medicine cleared her lungs. This wasn't just an isolated act of cruelty. It was part of a pattern, one she had ignored too long while focusing on board meetings and policy battles. In that moment, she made a silent promise: this hospital would change, and it would start with exposing the rot that people like Rebecca Halloway had allowed to fester behind polished walls. Because if her daughter could be humiliated here, in her own hospital, what chance did anyone else have? The low hum of the nebulizer filled the ward as Jordan's breathing steadied, her chest finally rising and falling with less struggle. Evelyn adjusted the mask and glanced at Maya, her eyes full of unspoken relief. For the moment, the immediate danger had passed, but Maya's gaze never left Dr. Rebecca Halloway. The woman stood stiffly by the nurse's station, arms crossed, her smirk replaced by a guarded scowl. She was rattled but not defeated. That much was clear. Maya straightened slowly, her tall frame commanding the room without raising her voice. "Dr. Halloway," she said, her tone even but sharp, "I want you to understand something. Tonight wasn't just a lapse in judgment. It was a revelation. You showed me exactly how you treat patients who don't fit your definition of worthy. Halloway's eyes flickered, but she held her ground. You're overreacting. One disagreement over transfer protocol. This wasn't protocol, Maya cut in, her voice firm. It was prejudice. And if you think I'll allow my hospital to be a place where lives are measured against your biases, you've miscalculated. The ward was silent. Even the charge nurse, who usually avoided conflict, stood frozen behind her desk, pretending to shuffle papers, but hanging on every word. Marcus Rivera shifted nervously, then cleared his throat. Dr. Caldwell, if I may, this isn't the first time. All eyes turned to him. His face flushed, but he pressed on. I've seen Dr. Halloway dismiss patients before. People with incomplete paperwork. Families who didn't speak English well. She says things like they should go somewhere else. He looked down, ashamed. I didn't say anything. I was scared. Evelyn laid a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It takes courage to speak up now. And you're not alone. Maya's eyes softened as she looked at Marcus. Thank you, Doctor. That kind of honesty is rare, and it's exactly what this hospital needs. She turned her attention back to Halloway. You see, Rebecca, this isn't just about my daughter anymore. It's about every patient you've turned away, every family you've humiliated. And I intend to find out just how many there are. Halloway bristled, her voice dripping with false confidence. Good luck proving anything. Paperwork is clean, charts are airtight. You won't find what you're looking for. But Maya only smiled faintly, the kind of smile that suggested she already had a plan. You forget, she said. I don't just walk these halls as a physician. I sit on the board. I have access to every patient record, every complaint, every dismissal. And I will find the patterns. You've left footprints, Rebecca. People like you always do. Halloway's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Later that night, once Jordan was stable and resting in a private room, Maya stepped into her office on the top floor of the hospital. She shut the door quietly, the weight of the evening settling on her shoulders. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, fighting back the anger that still simmered beneath her calm exterior. Evelyn entered quietly, carrying a folder. I pulled the incident logs you asked for, she said, placing it on the desk. And you were right. This isn't the first time. Maya opened the file, scanning page after page of formal complaints and resolved incidents. The language was sanitized, but the pattern was unmistakable. Patients of color transferred unnecessarily, families dismissed for incomplete insurance, repeat complaints about rude treatment. And in most cases, the attending physician was the same. Dr. Rebecca Halloway. Evelyn folded her arms. Administration buried these complaints, marked them as misunderstandings or training opportunities. Maya's lips pressed into a thin line. Which means this goes deeper than one doctor. There's rot in the system, and I intend to cut it out. She picked up her phone and dialed a number from memory. After 2 rings, a clear, confident voice answered. Olivia Brooks, said the voice on the other end. Olivia, it's Maya, she replied. I need your help. There was a pause, then a tone of recognition. It's been a while, Dr. Caldwell. What's going on? Maya glanced at the folder. Systemic discrimination, covered up by people who should know better. Tonight, it nearly cost my daughter her life. I won't let it happen again. Olivia's voice sharpened with interest. Send me what you have. If there's a pattern, I'll find it. And if the hospital board is complicit, they'll face the consequences, Maya finished, no matter how powerful. When the call ended, Evelyn leaned against the wall, studying Maya. You're really going to take them all on, aren't you? Maya looked out the window, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. Evelyn, if Jordan can be treated like she doesn't belong here, in a hospital that bears our family name, what does that say about everyone else who walks through these doors? This isn't about revenge. It's about restoring what this place was meant to be. Evelyn nodded slowly. Then you won't be fighting alone. You know you can count on me? Maya turned back to her, gratitude softening her features. I know, and we'll need more voices, nurses, residents, even patients. People willing to tell the truth. Her eyes hardened again. Rebecca Halloway thinks she's untouchable. The board thinks it can bury complaints. But I'm done fighting this quietly. It's time to bring the truth into the light. Downstairs, in the dimly lit staff lounge, Marcus Rivera sat alone, his hands gripping a paper cup of coffee. His mind replayed the scene over and over, Jordan struggling to breathe, Halloway's dismissive words, Maya's unwavering composure. For the first time, Marcus realized the depth of his own silence. He whispered to himself, "No more." He pulled out his phone and began typing, a message to a fellow resident who had once confided similar experiences. Then another message to a nurse who had filed a complaint that mysteriously vanished. The first sparks of a network began to form. Quiet voices ready to speak louder. Back in her office, Maya closed the folder and placed it firmly on her desk. It was only the beginning. The injustice against her daughter had peeled back a curtain she could no longer ignore. The next step would be strategic, not just saving Jordan, not just confronting Halloway, but exposing the deeper machinery of discrimination that had taken root in the very institution she had built. She straightened her shoulders, her expression resolute. The calm, commanding presence she carried in board meetings now had a sharper edge. Dr. Maya Caldwell was no longer just a physician or even a hospital owner. She was becoming something more dangerous to the system, an ally armed with truth, power, and unshakable determination. And those who had hidden behind policies and paperwork would soon discover just how much that combination could unravel. 2 days later, the boardroom at Caldwell Medical Center was filled with its usual polished chaos, leather chairs, gleaming oak table, coffee cups half drained, and a dozen powerful voices arguing over budget lines and expansion projects. But Maya Caldwell sat quietly at the head of the table, her face calm, her eyes sharp. She wasn't here for routine business. She was here to prepare for war. Next quarter projections show a potential shortfall if we continue the free care subsidy, Charles Whitman droned, adjusting his gold cufflinks. Frankly, it's unsustainable. We should tighten admissions policies to ensure only patients with solid insurance receive priority treatment. A few heads around the table nodded. Maya folded her hands. Interesting suggestion, Charles. Because, according to our incident reports, patients with solid insurance seem to receive very different treatment depending on who they are. The room stilled. Whitman's brow furrowed. What exactly are you implying? Maya slid a thin folder across the table. I'm not implying. I'm showing. Inside were carefully compiled pages, incident logs, complaints, and patterns Evelyn had uncovered. Each file told a story. A patient dismissed, humiliated, or delayed because they didn't fit the mold. And in case after case, the attending physician's name appeared, Dr. Rebecca Halloway. I cross-checked these against discharge times, insurance records, and staff statements, Maya continued. It's not just negligence. It's discrimination. Gasps rippled around the table. Some members shifted uncomfortably. Others looked at Whitman, who had grown pale. This is outrageous, Whitman blustered. Complaints are subjective. Patients exaggerate, Maya's eyes hardened. Then it must be quite a coincidence that nearly all these exaggerations involve the same physician and disproportionately target patients of color or those from working-class backgrounds. How many coincidences does it take before you call it a pattern? The silence that followed was deafening. That evening, Maya met Olivia Brooks in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe. Olivia, sharp-eyed and confident, placed her laptop on the table. You weren't exaggerating, she said, pulling up a spreadsheet. I've analyzed the data. Patients of color at Caldwell Medical are 4 times more likely to be transferred than white patients with identical conditions. And Dr. Halloway's name comes up disproportionately often in those cases. Maya nodded, unsurprised but grimly satisfied. What about the administration's role? Olivia scrolled. The complaints didn't disappear by accident. They were marked resolved by Alan Granger's office. Maya exhaled slowly. Alan, the administrator, had always positioned himself as the hospital's protector, smoothing over conflicts, making problems vanish. Now his silence had a darker meaning. So it's systemic, Maya said. Not just one doctor, but a culture that protects her. Olivia leaned in. This could be explosive, Maya. If we go public with this, it'll shake the hospital and maybe the city. But are you ready for the blowback? Maya thought of Jordan, clutching her chest, fighting for every breath while Halloway mocked her. The memory hardened into resolve. I'm ready. Back at the hospital, Marcus Rivera wrestled with his conscience. He sat in the residence lounge, typing up his notes from the night Jordan had been refused treatment. His hands trembled as he hit save. It wasn't just documentation, it was evidence. Evelyn entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. She slid one toward him. You're doing the right thing, she said softly. Marcus rubbed his forehead. You don't understand. Halloway controls our evaluations. If she finds out I'm speaking up, my career is over before it starts. Evelyn studied him for a moment, then said gently, sometimes silence costs more than speaking up. Ask yourself, what kind of doctor do you want to be? Marcus stared at his hands. Slowly he nodded. Then I'll stand with Dr. Caldwell, whatever it takes. Meanwhile, Mrs. Henrietta Johnson was preparing her own statement. Sitting in her modest living room, she spoke into her grandson's phone camera. I've been coming to that hospital for years, she said, her voice steady despite her age. And I've seen too many people like me turned away. Last week I saw a child fighting for breath and a doctor who laughed at her. That child deserves better. We all do. Her words carried the quiet authority of lived experience. When her grandson uploaded the video to social media, it began to spread. Neighbors sharing, churches reposting, local community leaders calling for accountability. The whispers of injustice were turning into a chorus. Within days, Maya had assembled a coalition. Nurses willing to testify, residents ready to share stories, patients brave enough to go public. And with Olivia's legal expertise, every piece of evidence was being woven into a narrative that no boardroom dismissal could silence. But Maya knew the system wouldn't go down quietly. One evening, as she left the hospital parking lot, Alan Granger was waiting by her car. His smile was thin, his tone oily. Maya, he said, we need to talk. She didn't stop walking. About what? He followed her. About your crusade. You're making dangerous accusations. If you continue, the press will catch wind. The hospital's reputation could collapse. Investors will walk. Maya unlocked her car, turning to face him. The hospital's reputation isn't built on investors. It's built on trust. And that's already collapsing. Alan's eyes narrowed. Think carefully. We can make this go away quietly. A suspension for Halloway. A private settlement for the family. No need for public drama. Maya stepped closer, her voice low but lethal. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't just about my daughter. This is about every patient who's been dismissed and silenced. And if you think I'll trade their dignity for your quiet resolution, you don't know me at all. For the first time, Alan faltered, his slick composure cracking. Maya held his gaze a moment longer, then got into her car. Tell your board, she said. The cover-up ends here. As she drove away, Maya felt the weight of what was coming. She had chosen the harder road, the public road. It would be messy, brutal, and full of resistance. But it was the only road that led to real change. Back at the hospital, Jordan was recovering, already asking questions about what had happened. Why didn't she help me, Mom? She whispered one night. Maya stroked her hair gently. Because sometimes people forget what it means to be human. But we're going to remind them. Jordan's eyes searched hers. You're not going to let them get away with it, are you? Maya smiled softly, but her voice was steel. Not this time. And with that promise, the strategic war for justice truly began. The first strike came not in the boardroom or the courtroom, but in Maya's inbox. An email from the hospital's legal department arrived late one night, its subject line cold and sterile. Confidential resolution opportunity. Inside, it offered what they called a goodwill settlement, a sum large enough to make most families disappear quietly. Attached was a non-disclosure agreement, binding Maya and Jordan to silence. Maya read it twice, her jaw tightening with every line. They thought this was about money. They thought they could pay for her daughter's humiliation and bury the truth with legal ink. She forwarded the email to Olivia Brooks with a single line, "Draft our response. It will not be polite." 2 days later, Alan Granger cornered her outside the cafeteria. His smile was wide, but his eyes were cold. "Maya," he began smoothly, "I hope you received our offer. It's generous, more than generous considering the circumstances. Think of Jordan's future. Think of your reputation. These things can get messy." Maya sipped her coffee, unflinching. "You're right, Alan. They can, which is why you should be very careful what you say next." His smile flickered, but he pressed on. "You're a smart woman. You know how fragile public trust is. If this story gets out, it won't just be Dr. Halloway who suffers. The hospital could lose funding. Entire departments could shut down. Staff could lose jobs. Are you really willing to cause that kind of damage for one incident?" Maya leaned in, her voice low and sharp. "For one incident. My daughter nearly suffocated while your star physician mocked her, and you call that one incident? No, Alan. This is a pattern, and patterns destroy trust faster than the truth ever could." She left him standing there, his smile finally gone. But Alan was not finished. Later that evening, Evelyn Carter approached Maya in her office, her face pale. "You won't believe what they're doing," she said, dropping a stack of files on the desk. The incident logs, meticulously documented by Evelyn, had been altered. Whole sections rewritten to erase key details, words softened, phrases changed. Where Halloway had once written "refused treatment," the new logs read "recommended transfer." Where "patient refused by physician" had been logged, it now said "patient stable and redirected." "They're rewriting history," Evelyn whispered, her hands trembling. "Just like they've done before." Maya flipped through the pages, her anger simmering into resolve. "Then we'll show the originals," she said calmly. "You made copies, didn't you?" Evelyn gave a small, defiant smile. "Of course I did." Meanwhile, Marcus Rivera felt the pressure firsthand. In the middle of his night shift, he was summoned to Dr. Halloway's office. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "I hear you've been talking," she said, her voice low and venomous. Marcus stiffened. "I've been truthful." Halloway leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Let me explain something. Residency is survival. One bad evaluation, one whisper in the right ear, and you'll never practice medicine again. You think, Doctor, Caldwell can protect you? She won't always be around, but me," she tapped her chest, "I'll still be here, and I decide who stays." Marcus swallowed hard, his palms damp with sweat. The threat was clear, but so was his choice. He thought of Jordan's face, pale and gasping, and of Evelyn's words. "What kind of doctor do you want to be?" He met Halloway's glare and said, voice trembling but resolute, "Then so be it. I'd rather lose my residency than my conscience." For a flicker of a moment, Halloway's composure cracked. Her eyes blazed with anger, but Marcus walked out before she could answer. While the hospital scrambled internally, whispers spread externally. Mrs. Henrietta Johnson's testimony, recorded by her grandson, had begun to circulate online. Local community leaders were picking it up. Neighborhood churches were sharing it. The words Caldwell Medical and discrimination were starting to trend. Whitman, alarmed, convened an emergency call with select board members. His voice, usually smooth and commanding, was tinged with frustration. "We cannot let this spiral," he insisted. "The Caldwell name carries weight. But if the public believes this nonsense, our investors will vanish. We need to contain it, fast." "And how do you propose we do that?" one member asked nervously. "Pressure," Whitman replied coldly. "On staff, on residents, even on Maya if we have to. Remind her what's at stake. She's not immune to fallout." The suggestion lingered, dangerous and poisonous, but Maya anticipated every move. With Olivia's help, she began securing sworn statements from nurses and residents, locking their testimonies into legal affidavits that couldn't be rewritten or lost. She made digital backups of every original file Evelyn had saved. She even authorized a quiet internal audit, pulling records that revealed years of skewed transfer data. Piece by piece, she was building a fortress of truth, evidence that no cover-up could erase. One evening, Jordan wandered into Maya's study, finding her surrounded by papers and files. The teenager's eyes still held the shadows of her hospital ordeal, but also a spark of curiosity. "Mom," she said softly, "why are you doing all this? You already own the hospital. You could fire her and be done." Maya set her pen down, meeting her daughter's gaze. "Because it's not just about firing one person. If I don't fix the system, there will always be another Halloway, and one day it won't just be you gasping for air. It'll be someone else's child, someone without a mother who can fight back." Jordan's eyes welled with tears, but she nodded. "Then I want to help, even if it's just telling my story." Maya's heart ached with pride. She pulled her daughter close. "You already are, sweetheart. Just by standing here, alive, you're proof that their lies won't win." The hospital's attempts at suppression grew more desperate. Altered records, whispered threats, settlement offers dressed as generosity. But with every tactic, Maya's coalition only grew stronger. Evelyn and Marcus rallied the staff, Olivia crafted airtight legal strategies, and the community outside the hospital walls demanded answers. The antagonists had underestimated their target. They thought they were silencing a mother. Instead, they had awakened the owner, and Maya Caldwell was preparing to take the fight public. The grand boardroom of Caldwell Medical Center was usually a place of quiet power. Mahogany walls, gleaming chandeliers, and the air of exclusivity that only wealth could buy. But on this morning it felt different. Tense, uneasy. Every seat was filled, board members, senior staff, legal counsel. At the far end of the room, cameras and reporters had been granted unusual access. Their lenses aimed at the long table where Dr. Maya Caldwell now sat at the head. Charles Whitman, trying to project confidence, tapped his pen against his notepad. "This meeting is highly irregular," he said coolly. "Inviting press into internal affairs is reckless." Maya didn't flinch. "What's reckless," she replied evenly, "is allowing discrimination to fester in a hospital built on trust. If this institution wants to survive, it must face the truth in the open." A murmur rippled through the room. Alan Granger cleared his throat, his voice oily as ever. "Let's keep emotions out of this. We're here to discuss an unfortunate misunderstanding." Olivia Brooks, seated beside Maya as legal counsel, cut him off. "Call it what it is, Mr. Granger. Discrimination and attempted cover-up," gasps erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Maya stood, her calm presence commanding immediate attention. She placed a stack of files on the table. "These are incident reports and complaints from patients who were dismissed, mocked, or transferred unnecessarily. Many of them were patients of color. Many of them never returned." She clicked a remote and a screen behind her lit up with charts Olivia had prepared. Graphs showed stark disparities. Black patients transferred at 4 times the rate of white patients. Identical conditions treated with wildly different protocols. "This," Maya said, pointing to the data, "is not coincidence. It's a pattern." She clicked again. The screen shifted to testimonies. Evelyn's voice played first, steady and resolute. "I witnessed patients denied treatment because of assumptions about their background or insurance. It was not medical judgment, it was bias." Then Marcus Rivera's statement, "I saw a teenager struggling to breathe, and the attending physician refused to treat her. If her mother hadn't intervened, she could have died." The room grew heavy with silence. Finally, Mrs. Henrietta Johnson's video appeared. Her weathered face filled the screen, her voice trembling but strong. "I've been in those rooms. I've seen the way they treat people like me. Last week I saw it happen to a child. And I can't stay quiet anymore." By the time the video ended, even the most stoic board members looked shaken. Halloway, who had been silent until now, suddenly rose to her feet. "This is a circus," she snapped. "A smear campaign. These so-called testimonies are biased. And this data? It's cherry-picked. Anyone who's worked in medicine knows transfers happen. You can't pin systemic problems on one doctor." Maya turned to her voice steady. "You're right, Rebecca. This isn't just about one doctor. It's about a culture that allowed your behavior to go unchecked for years. A culture protected by administrators who buried complaints instead of addressing them. And a board that closed its eyes to patterns because it was easier than facing uncomfortable truths." She let her words hang, sweeping her gaze across the entire table. "This isn't a smear campaign. It's accountability." Alan Granger slammed his hand on the table. "Enough, Maya, think carefully. If you continue this, the hospital's reputation will collapse. Donors will leave. Do you really want to destroy what you've built?" Maya stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "I'd rather destroy a corrupt system than let it destroy another patient." The reporter's pens scratched furiously. Cameras flashed. The confrontation was no longer containable. It was spreading beyond the walls of the hospital. Whitman, his composure cracking, tried one last maneuver. "Dr. Caldwell, surely we can handle this privately. No need for public scandal. We can suspend Dr. Halloway, make internal adjustments." "Quiet solutions," Maya shook her head. "Quiet solutions are what got us here. Silence has protected prejudice for too long. This ends today in the light." She turned toward the reporters. "This hospital will not hide from its failures. The community deserves transparency, and I intend to give it to them." The room erupted, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, staff members whispering among themselves in the chaos. Jordan quietly entered the room, her presence unexpected but undeniable. Still pale from her ordeal, she walked to her mother's side. The crowd hushed. She took the microphone, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger with each word. "I came here because I couldn't breathe. But the real suffocation wasn't just my asthma. It was being told I didn't belong. No one should feel that way in a hospital. No one." Her words pierced deeper than any statistic. Even some board members lowered their eyes in shame. Maya placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, pride shining in her eyes. "This is why we're here," she said. "Not for power, not for image, but for every patient who deserves dignity." The confrontation ended, not with a gavel, but with silence, the heavy kind that comes when truth leaves no room for denial. Reporters swarmed, board members fumbled, and administrators scrambled for statements. But the narrative was no longer theirs to control. Maya had seized it, and the world was listening. Outside the hospital that afternoon, protesters gathered holding signs that read, "Patients first" and "Health care, not hate." News vans lined the streets. The name Caldwell Medical was on every broadcast, every headline. For the first time, the hospital's gleaming facade cracked, and what lay beneath was exposed for all to see, and Maya knew this was only the beginning. The fallout came quickly, faster than anyone at Caldwell Medical Center could have imagined. Within 24 hours of the public confrontation, news outlets across the city ran the headline, "Hospital Owner Confronts Discrimination at Caldwell Medical." Local television played the clips of Maya's speech on repeat. Her calm authority contrasted against Dr. Halloway's defensive outbursts. On social media, Jordan's quiet but powerful words, "No one should feel that way in a hospital," spread like wildfire. For the first time in years, the city wasn't talking about Caldwell Medical's state-of-the-art facilities or its wealthy donors. They were talking about injustice, and they were demanding answers. The mayor's office released a statement calling for an independent review of the hospital's practices. Civil rights organizations filed petitions for a formal investigation. Patients and families flooded the hospitals, hotline with stories of their own, cases eerily similar to Jordan's. One caller recalled being transferred while in active labor because her insurance wasn't sufficient. Another spoke of waiting 8 hours in the ER with chest pain, only to be told to try another hospital. Each story was a thread in a larger tapestry of neglect and bias. Maya listened to them all, her heart heavy but resolute. Every voice was proof that what had happened to her daughter wasn't an isolated incident. It was systemic. Inside the hospital, the atmosphere shifted overnight. Staff who had once whispered their frustrations in break rooms now spoke openly, emboldened by Maya's stand. Nurses shared stories of patients dismissed. Residents admitted their fear of retaliation, and even a few attending physicians quietly acknowledged that the culture had been toxic for years. In the staff lounge, Marcus Rivera stood before a small group of colleagues. His voice trembled at first but grew steadier as he spoke. "I was afraid to speak out. I thought silence would protect me. But silence protects the wrong people. If we want this hospital to be better, we have to be louder." The room erupted in applause. Meanwhile, Olivia Brooks worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She compiled testimonies, filed motions, and coordinated with civil rights groups. "We're building more than a case," she told Maya one night over stacks of documents. "We're building momentum. The system won't be able to ignore this." Her prediction proved true when the state health department announced a full investigation into Caldwell Medical. Inspectors arrived unannounced, combing through records, interviewing staff, and reviewing years of patient outcomes. What they uncovered was damning. Transfer rates disproportionately high for minority patients. Complaints systematically altered or erased. A pattern of financial incentives tied to selective admissions. The findings painted a picture not just of individual prejudice, but of institutional rot. The first resignation came swiftly. Under mounting pressure, Alan Granger stepped down as hospital administrator. His carefully worded statement blamed personal health reasons. But everyone knew the truth. His complicity in burying complaints had been exposed. Next came Charles Whitman, the board member who had once dismissed Maya's concerns about the wrong kind of patients, faced public outrage after his comments resurfaced in leaked recordings. Donors distanced themselves. Colleagues demanded his removal, and within a week, he resigned in disgrace. The once untouchable pillars of the institution were crumbling. And then there was Dr. Rebecca Halloway. Her defiance at the public confrontation had only worsened her case. Patients came forward with specific stories of her behavior. A teenager denied pain medication because she looked like a drug seeker. An elderly immigrant woman laughed at for her accent. A man in diabetic crisis delayed treatment because his insurance card was out of state. Each story chipped away at her credibility until the medical board had no choice but to act. After a heated hearing, her license was suspended pending investigation. When reporters asked her for comment, her only reply was bitter, "This is a witch hunt." But the public had already judged otherwise. Through it all, Maya remained composed. She attended hearings, met with investigators, and continued to run the hospital with steady leadership. But she was also careful to shift the spotlight. "This isn't just about punishing a few individuals," she told a packed press conference. "It's about transforming an entire system. We must rebuild Caldwell Medical into a place where every patient, regardless of race, income, or background, is treated with dignity." Her words resonated beyond the hospital walls. Other institutions across the city began reviewing their own practices. Advocacy groups cited Caldwell Medical as an example of why accountability mattered. The ripple effect was spreading. One evening, Maya walked through the hospital lobby and paused. Where there had once been a sterile wall of plaques honoring wealthy donors, a new installation had appeared, a mural of diverse faces, patients, nurses, doctors, community members. At the bottom, bold letters read, "Every life matters here." Evelyn approached, smiling softly. "The staff put it up this morning. Their way of saying change has already begun." Maya felt a lump rise in her throat. Change wasn't finished, not by a long shot, but it was real, and it was starting here. At home, Jordan sat curled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as her mother entered. "Mom," she said, holding out the screen. "People keep messaging me." Saying my story gave them courage to speak up about their own experiences. I didn't think it would matter this much. Maya sat beside her, pulling her into a gentle embrace. It matters, Jordan, more than you'll ever know. You reminded people that their voices matter. That's how change begins. Jordan smiled faintly, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. For the first time since her attack, the weight seemed lighter. The scandal had begun with one teenager gasping for air, dismissed as unworthy of care. But now it had become something larger, an unmasking of systemic injustice, a call for reform, a demand for humanity. Caldwell Medical would never be the same, and neither would the city it served. 6 months later, Caldwell Medical Center looked very different. The once cold, hierarchical institution was undergoing a quiet revolution. The changes weren't just in policy manuals or board meetings. They were visible in the faces of patients and staff alike. A new motto hung above the main entrance: healing without barriers. Inside the emergency department, the shift was palpable. Nurses now had direct lines to patient advocates, ensuring concerns could not be buried. Residents underwent bias, training not as a formality, but as a living practice woven into their daily work. Community liaisons met with families weekly, listening to their experiences and reporting directly to leadership. And at the center of it all was Dr. Maya Caldwell. She had not sought the spotlight, but it had found her. Her confrontation with Halloway had become a rallying cry across the city, and she embraced the responsibility with quiet determination. She spent her days balancing the hospital's operations with reform initiatives, and her nights meeting with community leaders, listening more than she spoke. "This hospital belongs to the people," she told them often. "Not just to the privileged, not just to those with the best insurance. Every life that comes through these doors matters." The changes rippled beyond Caldwell Medical. Other hospitals in the state began revising their own practices, spurred by public scrutiny. Medical schools invited Maya to speak about the necessity of equity in healthcare, and her lectures left students with a sense of urgency that textbooks never could. Civil rights organizations highlighted Caldwell Medical as a model of accountability. Policymakers began drafting new guidelines to prevent the erasure of patient complaints. What had begun as a single moment of injustice was reshaping the system itself. For Jordan, the journey was personal as well as public. She returned to school with a new perspective, her experience fueling her drive. Once shy about speaking up, she now joined her school's debate team, where her speeches about fairness and justice drew standing ovations. Her classmates no longer saw her just as the honor student with asthma, but as someone who had lived through injustice and refused to be silenced. One afternoon, during a community forum at the hospital, Jordan spoke before a crowd of patients, doctors, and reporters. Her voice carried a quiet strength. "I thought I was powerless that night. I thought no one would believe me, but then I saw my mom fight, and I realized that telling the truth is power. We can't let fear silence us, not in hospitals, not anywhere." Her words were met with thunderous applause. Evelyn Carter thrived in her new role as head of patient advocacy, a department Maya had created to ensure staff like her could never be silenced again. She often reflected on that night in the ward, when she'd had to watch Jordan suffer while protocol and prejudice clashed. Now she was part of rewriting the rules so it would never happen again. Marcus Rivera, once the timid resident, grew into a doctor with a spine of steel. His decision to stand against Halloway had cost him professionally in the short term, but under Maya's mentorship, he found a place in the new culture of the hospital. "I became a doctor to save lives," he said at his residency graduation. "Now I know that sometimes saving lives means speaking out, even when it's hard." As for Dr. Rebecca Halloway, her license remained suspended, and her name had become synonymous with everything the new Caldwell Medical stood against. She faded from the headlines, her arrogance replaced by silence. Charles Whitman's resignation was followed by the appointment of younger, more diverse board members, people committed not just to profit, but to people. The old guard's grip on the hospital had finally broken. One bright spring morning, Maya stood on the steps of the hospital, looking out at a crowd gathered for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. A new wing was being opened. The Community Care Center, designed to serve uninsured and underinsured patients with dignity and efficiency. As she held the ceremonial scissors, Maya spoke to the crowd. Her voice carried the same calm authority that had silenced Halloway months before. "This building is more than bricks and mortar," she said. "It is proof that change is possible, that when we confront injustice, we don't just heal wounds, we prevent them. And when one voice speaks out, it gives others the courage to speak too. That is how we build a legacy worth passing on." She glanced at Jordan, standing proudly in the front row, and her voice softened. "We built this hospital for patients like my daughter, but today I realize it belongs to all of us, and together we will protect it." The crowd erupted in applause as the ribbon fell and the doors swung open. Families streamed inside, some nervous, some hopeful, but all welcomed with warmth and dignity. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Maya and Jordan sat on the hospital roof, watching the lights flicker on one by one. "Do you think it'll last?" Jordan asked quietly. Maya smiled, draping an arm around her. "Change is never finished, Jordan. It's something we fight for every day. But as long as there are people willing to stand up, it will last." Jordan leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. "Then I want to be one of those people." "You already are," Maya whispered. The story that had begun with a refusal had ended with a revolution. The laughter of a dismissive doctor had sparked a movement of truth, accountability, and hope. And out of the pain of one night had grown a legacy that would echo through generations. For Caldwell Medical was no longer just a hospital. It had become a symbol, and every patient who walked through its doors was a reminder of why Maya Caldwell, and so many others, had refused to stay silent. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.